Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back with another video from Annie News. So, yeah, I've still not watched this anime, but I want to know why this guy's so beastly. Obviously, Giguk's done a really good video explaining why you should check it out. Mother's Basement's done one, but I feel like Annie News is going to go more into in depth of like what his abilities are like, why he's able to do the things he does within the world, and I think that's going to be a really cool approach as well. So yeah, I think Eminence in the Shadow is going to be something I'll probably catch up on next season. Because we've got a new season coming up now. But yeah, let's check out why Cid Kageno is so OP.
Out of all the isekai protagonists we've ever talked about, Cid Kageno might just be the most overpowered out of all of them.
Interesting.
That doesn't necessarily mean he's the strongest in terms of overall power,
Right,
but when it comes to what
within his world, what he does is just racket.
constitutes an overpowered character,
Right.
Cid takes it to the limit, then goes even further
That's
past
what
it.
it seems like.
He has a
It seems like
certain
the selling
trait
point
that
for
most,
it as
if
well.
not all, other isekai protagonists don't even come close to having.
Ah.
And it's that aspect that I feel differentiates him as the most overpowered protagonist in an isekai. So, as I go over what that is using details left out from the novels,
Love it. Oh, Annie News is so good at this. Let's go.
hopefully I can convey why it is Cid's overwhelming shows of power are fundamentally different from everyone else's.
Sick.
To be overpowered means to overcome with superior strength.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have to refer to a person's absolute max potential, but can instead relate to that person's ability to overwhelm someone. So, when I say that Cid is the most overpowered, I'm not talking about how strong he is relative to other characters from different isekai, but instead the scale at which he overwhelms his opponents in battle.
Right, within his world, though. Or, oh, okay, right.
I'm talking about his ability to defeat them in such a one-sided manner that to even call it a battle would be an insult to what truly constitutes one.
Right.
Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking how Ainz and Rimuru tend to do the same, but the
Oh,
core
yeah.
of what makes them so overwhelmingly strong is fundamentally different from what makes Cid so strong.
Okay.
Yes, all three of these characters do have magic and abilities incomparable to anyone else in their universe, but for Ainz and Rimuru, that's just about all they have.
I mean, Rimuru still has, like, certain people that he's worried about, and Ainz is still questioning potential enemies that he's going to meet.
They're overpowered because their magic build and
In
stats
the anime
allow them to be.
that I'm watching. at
Take
the
away
moment.
Ainz's hundreds of spells and his pay-to-win equipment, or Rimru's ultimate abilities and his innate traits as a slime, and what you're left with are two average salarymen who wouldn't survive in a fight otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to someone like Cid, though, even without his magic and the equipment that stems from it, his immense knowledge of combat and mastery over every single aspect of it makes him a daunting opponent even before he was isekai.
Yeah, from my understanding, like, he would go out and be a vigilante, fight people, like, already. Like, yeah.
He applies this additional element of experience on top of all the other things that the likes of
Right,
Ainz and Rimuru
that's
possess as well,
Cool, right.
making for this overpowered character who not only defeats enemies with overwhelming
I am atomic.
magic, but also with an understanding of combat so refined that even the most experienced fighter could be defeated with feints alone. Now, I don't expect you to understand what I'm saying right away, so allow me to explain just how in-depth Cid's sense for battle goes.
Let's go.
A deeper look into this extra layer of power that's
Excuse
unique
me.
to him and ensures his opponents are defeated in the most absolute way possible. Then, hopefully after, you'll acknowledge just a little bit of what I'm talking about. Starting all the way back before Cid had isekai'd himself, his passion to become stronger had led him to practice pretty much every form of combat. From karate to boxing and swordplay to mixed martial arts, Cid engrossed himself in any and everything that would make him more powerful.
Wow, okay.
That didn't mean he had become the greatest martial artist in the world, but if he kept training the way he did, then Cid definitely knew it was in the realm of possibility. Fast forward now to when Cid is 10 years old in the New World, and a clear disparity is noticed between his fighting style and the ones more common here. You see, with the ones he'd learned being a refined mix of the best humanity could come up with, it was only natural the more independent styles of each kingdom seem, well, rough. Since he'd spent years learning a style of fighting where movement was minimized and the best of each combat was combined to create the perfect fight, Cid could easily choose what was best for just about any situation.
Mate, I love this. So he was like, he basically like built his base before getting teleported, and then his base was just like, you know.
On the other hand, with this New World's fighting techniques staying within their countries of origin, the different schools of combat haven't yet merged into their optimal versions of themselves. Secret skills and hidden techniques are locked away within the jurisdiction of the country that created them, resulting in the inability for any person to refine and improve on what was taught to them. So, with Cid being in possession of this pre-existing skill set, that already puts him at an advantage over everyone else in the world.
Nice.
Combine that with the existence of magic, and that small advantage turns into something completely different. Reason being that magic completely changes the baseline of a person's physical performance.
Right.
Like, if he can now lift someone up with a single hand via magic, then everything he knows about close quarters combat is completely useless.
Yeah.
It'd be like trying to fight a gorilla as a regular human. Say he was pinned in a mounted grapple, then he could simply flex his abs to fly through the air.
Nice.
If his foot was caught during an attack, then a slight activation of his leg muscles would send that person flying. These were just a couple of the many new options that needed to be considered now that magic was added to the mix.
Cool.
More importantly than that though, the speed and distance at which a person would step into their attacks was completely different and harder to predict now. It was the hardest thing that Cid had to get used to. Since martial arts was all about reading your opponent, knowing their range was of the utmost importance.
Cool.
It meant understanding the angle, position, and distance of their attacks, which in turn allowed him to optimize his own. With those three aspects being everything, as soon as they were understood at its fullest, it didn't matter whether the person attacking was 5 or 100 meters away. Cid could now determine the exact point to stand, which would allow him to both react to an attack and land a blow right after.
I'm loving the art on this as well. I might check the manga out for this, actually. We'll see.
It was an optimized position defined by a single millimeter. Combine that with an adjustment to the angle of his hits, along with a slight turn to the position of his stance, and those would all be crucial differences, creating advantages for him and disadvantages for his opponent. It was all about creating opportunities through the narrowest of margins, not jumping in 16 feet then dashing 19 back. That was how Cid viewed combat, and he would quickly remaster it even with the addition of magic. Now, that's not to say Cid valued technique over strength, because if he was forced to choose between one or the other, then 10 times out of 10 Cid would always choose strength. Reason being that he firmly believed advanced tactics without the power to back them up was useless. When confronted with strategies that relied solely on power, speed, or reaction time though, those were the ones that Cid hated the most. They completely disregarded the very subtleties of battle that made them so amazing in the first place. So, as Cid himself likes to put it, strength was natural, but mastery required effort. And it's those words that I believe lie at the core of what differentiates Cid from every other overpowered isekai protagonist. Sure, Ainz and Rimuru and Hajime may have mastered the use of their own skills and magic, but Cid has mastered all that plus the art of combat.
Right,
You see,
yeah.
to him, skill and expertise are pretty much everything. He allows his techniques to bolster his strength, uses his ingenuity to dictate his speed, then his reaction time allows him to scope out potential attacks.
So, there are reasons behind why he is so goddamn powerful. Like, I love this. Like, he already was working on stuff before being isekai'd, and then when you're isekai'd and into a magical world, magic's there, and I love this. Whoa.
They're all aspects that remain independent from the physicality a lot of the others seem to rely on. And though that is definitely important, Cid would never screw up a fight by relying solely on that or any of the other aspects. For example, let's take a look at how he approached his fight with Grease. First, Cid walked forward and waited for Grease to take a swing at him. As soon as that move was made, not only was Cid made aware of his current range, but that was cue for a minute quantity of magic to be used to speed himself up.
Right.
He would focus the tiniest bit of magic into his feet, compress it till the time of release, then use its explosive impact to make himself faster.
I love that there's reasoning behind it, because I was just, from the videos I've watched about this anime, it's like, it just seems like stupid, like, kind of like over the top, like, he's just ridiculous, but I love this, pinpointing why he's able to do what he does. This is boss.
So, while Grease's sword was slicing past a target no longer there, Cid was placing himself within range for his own attacks. A slight shift in position that required minimal effort, yet still provided him with all the advantage. When Cid went to initiate his own attack next, he didn't use magic to make himself faster, as their difference in speed no longer mattered anymore. Since he was now on the offensive, Grease had no choice but to move in response to it, which to Cid indicated he could no longer attack anymore. One more step forward, and Cid would now put both parties in a position too awkward for either to attack,
This looks sick.
leading Grease to step backward just like how Cid had anticipated. Even if he didn't though, just reading the shift
Look at that. Oh, it looks cool. I'm gonna have to get the first volume and just check it out.
in Grease's magical energy was enough to indicate that he was heading there. So this time Cid had manipulated the battle by using his own position to affect his opponents,
Wow.
once again creating a clean opportunity for him to strike without any risk to himself. Now, I know Grease really isn't the best opponent to highlight an overwhelming difference in power, but as the first instance where we get to see how Cid fights, it sets the foundation for how battle is perceived by him. It isn't just this competition to see who's stronger, but instead a dance of tactics in which one must overcome the other. Grease was definitely stronger than Cid was here, but because Cid understood exactly what was happening, Grease could only feel as if he was getting toyed with. He literally felt he was being overpowered, much to the point that he knew he could only wait and accept his death.
Look at the panic in his face. He knows he ain't got a chance. Damn.
Now, the battle that truly highlights this fundamental difference in his approach to combat is that one-sided fight against the Witch of Calamity, the literal strongest woman in recorded history who Cid beat just as easily as he did with everyone else.
I don't mind spoilers because if I'm honest, I don't see me getting into this anime because of ease of access. It's not on anything I paid to watch, if I'm honest, but this does seem sick. If I get the chance, I probably will. Like, you know, see how the next anime season is. I'm catching up with stuff. Recently just caught up with My Hero Academia. I was on season 4, sped through season 5. I'm waiting for the last episode next week. Season 6 I'll be up to date, and then Gundam, Mercury, Witch of Mercury is starting back up, so I was going to start that up. This is definitely going to be on the list of things to catch up with, as well as Made in Abyss. I will watch it.
What makes this fight different from all the others though is that in this one he actually had to try a little bit. Not in the sense of relying more on his magic and his OP abilities, but rather through greater insight into what his opponent was capable of. It's an in-depth analysis that he likes to refer to as a conversation. Whenever Cid finds himself facing a worthy opponent, he likes to treat the battle as this different type of form for it.
Okay.
You see, every little thing from a shift in gaze to the position of the feet were all tells that indicated something about the opponent he was facing. They were these tiny cues that each held a very specific meaning to it. So, the more of these little things he observed, the more meanings he could determine from them, and that in turn would lead to figuring out how best to deal with them. It was the very core essence of what fighting was all about to him. Only the most skilled in combat could perceive
so well
purpose in
animated,
the
man. It
smallest
looks
of actions, then use that knowledge to prepare a superior response to it. So, by thinking of it as a conversation, each person's communication skills would be their ability to read their opponent. The stronger your communication skills were, the further ahead you could anticipate, and that in turn would allow you to respond accordingly. If the other person's communication skills were just as strong, then they too could do the same and anticipate prior to your follow-through and then react to it, resulting in this endless back and forth exchange in which the conversation continues until one person's dialogue becomes too much for the other.
Right.
On the other hand, if an opponent's conversational skills were lacking, much like how many of them do, a dialogue would never even get started in the first place. It would just end up in one party acting on impulse until the fight ended, which to Cid couldn't even be considered a conversation. To him, that was no different than trying to end the fight with a game of rock, paper, scissors.
Damn. Oh, okay.
So, whenever Cid
The Mother's Basement, the video on that. It's just, okay.
was faced with an opponent, every time he would go in
It's the only
trying
reason
to
I
start this
know
conversation, but every time until now he would always be met with silence. His opponents would always go in trying to win on impulse, resulting in a far cry from the true type of battle he'd always been yearning for. When he does have the chance to have this conversation though, that's when we get to see just how far this gap in skill and experience truly takes him. So, first he starts with observation, initially by simply staring to find those first subtle meanings, then
I love the art. The art, and I'm gonna have to check this manga out.
following it up by granting the initiative to judge speed, mobility, and destructive capacity. It's a step that usually takes less time the stronger your communication skills were. Once that observation was complete, the next step was to refine his movements, and this typically involved removing unnecessary motion when dodging. Like, if he could turn full steps into half steps and 2 moves into 1, then that would directly result in a window in which a counterattack could be made. You see, the less time spent moving to dodge meant more time for a counterattack.
Oh yeah,
bringing us to the third step in which the first 2 were creating an opening for. Sure, Cid could have evaded Aurora forever, but doing that would never lead to victory.
Gotta attack at some point.
His dodges needed to be refined so that he could create space for a counterattack. And that was the essence of the conversation he was having. It was actually noted perfectly through the observations of Alexia. She was the first to understand exactly what Shadow was doing here. Now, for someone as skilled as Cid, the outcome of this battle was made certain all the way back at step 1. His initial observations showed Aurora wasn't as skilled at communicating as him.
Right.
So, by the time the first move was even made, both seemed to understand it was only a matter of time until the battle would be decided by him. Now, despite it being so one-sided,
wow, that looks freaking sick. Anyway,
I believe this to be the best fight that highlights that fundamental difference I've been talking about. I mean, Cid definitely could have used any number of his OP abilities to end this right away, but that's never the type of fight that he's trying to go for. Unlike what Ainz, Rimuru, or anyone else does, Cid is always going in trying to start this conversation.
Right.
He wants to begin this dialogue so he can beat his opponent in the most absolute way possible. Achieving that perfect victory is all that ever matters to him. Victory to everyone else just means defeating your opponent, but victory to Cid is something completely different. It's the process of systematically dismantling them in the most overwhelming way possible. A precise operation that always ends with him overpowering them both in strength and technique.
Nice.
So, whereas every other isekai protagonist wins their battles through strength and power, Cid takes it a step above and bolsters all that with technique and ingenuity.
Cool.
He would never solely rely on the magic or skills that came from being isekai'd. No. Instead...
Right, so it's not just like, right, I've got this ability and I can just abuse it. It's like, nah, I want to make it feel fair to myself.
He chooses to rely on himself. His refined experience with combat, which results in this level of overpowering that we only ever see from him. Thus the reason I think Cid to be the most OP character out of all of them. Once again, that doesn't mean he's the strongest, but when it comes to the scale at which he overwhelms his opponent, every other protagonist doesn't even come close. There's no one else who achieves absolute victory and inflicts such hopeless defeat like the way that Cid does. I mean, the guy literally beat the hero Olivier without so much as a sword or magic. He beat Anna Rose with perfect spacing and terrifying foresight, then humiliated Iris through a series of feints so intimidating she couldn't even move. Now, if that doesn't highlight that fundamental gap in combat experience, then I honestly don't know what else to tell you. It's his literal life passion to be the most overpowered. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on what I think of Cid. Whether you happen to think the same or not, I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments. This was honestly just a fun little topic that I wanted to talk about. Nothing that needs to be taken too seriously, I hope. But with this now done, I'll be going back and covering Danmachi next week. So if you're a fan of that, then feel free to check out my other videos. Until then though, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time.
Ciao. Sick. And yeah, there are the cut contents. I went away on holiday, didn't I? And I've missed out on a few. So, might dive back into the Danmachi cut contents. I'm not sure. Might do. But then again, I just watched the video about something I've not watched an anime about, so... Because I am up to date with Danmachi. Loving it. It's great. That was really cool. That was really interesting. I like looking into why he's so OP. Everything else was just like, this guy's so amazingly stupid and it's fun. And it's like, but this was like, here's why he does it. That was boss. So yeah, anyway, thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video I upload, link in the description of the Patreon page. $1 a month/support. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys for that. And thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe, and leave comments down below. Let me know if I should watch some future videos. I'll see you guys. Nick, damn. Bye.